So, Reggie, one of the things I've heard you talk about a lot is the four revolutions of information that have happened in human history. So, tell us a little bit about these four information revolutions and what they mean to the church, why the church should care about them, and how they impact how we should be thinking about the future of the church right now.
It's fascinating because I think a lot of times we're so mired in day to day. Sometimes it just helps to get up to the 37,000 foot view and take a look at what's going on that
Yeah.
have far more impact on the church than anything we devise at a program level or try to fix or all that. There have been four information revolutions in human history. The invention of writing around Mesopotamia and China, both it rose up at the same time. It changed everything. I mean, you could come out and play then, you communicate with people outside your tribe. It changed everything. Agrarian society, you could begin to share information so that human knowledge was not just locked up in one brain at a time. Invention of the book, about the time of Jesus really, which allowed for a same page experience. Scrolls, papyri, and all. But once individual sheets. But once you invented the book, then you could a codex. Then people in different places could refer to the same information that had access to a codex reproduction. Of course, that was very painful and slow, like the illuminated manuscripts. 26 pages a week. Was about. It was a top production. If you had a lot of candles, keep the light on late at night, and a lot of pens sharpened. But then the invention of the printing press was the third, which then, of course, now you can mass produce thousands of pages a week. The initial printing teams, they didn't even have to know how to read. I mean, as long as one person knew how to read. Of course, there are people that still think publishers can't read, but you only authors think that. What did you not get? The real impact of course, it made possible it came out of the Renaissance, but made possible the Reformation. So Luther's sermons are mass produced and all over. But larger than that, it made possible the whole mass standardization that gave rise to the modern economy, factory model. You get a Toyota part, you don't go just get any part, it fits your. All of that's made possible by standardized information, made possible by the capacity to reproduce that information very quickly and with exactness that the printing press allowed. So the modern nation state, our modern economy, even our educational program. So that kids are in second grade. That's a mass standardized. We all know every kid has the same developmental pattern. And so every kid in second grade is right where everybody else, but we mass standardized curriculums and all that. Churches, in the church. So we have a hymnal, that's produced, and curriculum and all that, the whole, so the modern educational system, seminary, all that's based on that information revolution. The fourth one, though, is we're in the very first, and by the way, I would say that typically, or let's just go back to the third. It took about 150 years for the implications of mass standardization, the printing press, to work its way through all of the various parts of our culture, not just religious, but economic, the business, government, healthcare. All of that. It took a long time. Now we're in the early decades of the digital revolution, which is, the fourth information revolution. So the upheaval, the dystasis that's caused by disruptive technologies, and every one of these information revolutions, particularly this one, is very disruptive, but it's making possible mass customization. Because once you digitize information, you can move it around, you can manipulate it, you can do. I mean, very soon we'll be able to digitize your DNA and turn you into a song. And you'll discover that your song is different from everyone else's song. No kidding. How God built a choir. So you've got the capacity now to customize your health care. I mean, this is coming very quickly with gene therapy and all of that. That's really, and I can find out what I'm eating that's really making me fat. It can't be the amount of food. It's got to be something related to something I'm eating. I'm pretty sure. And then, and there are listeners here or viewers, however. Anyone under 30, 35 can't even remember a world that was. They never grew up in a world untouched by this revolution. I mean, you and I, you're right on the cusp of this.
Yep.
But I can remember a world where if I wanted a record, if I wanted music, I had to go to a music store to get it. I couldn't suck the Library of Congress out of thin air, and put that on my phone. And I had to buy 12 songs, just to get one that I liked. And I had to go to a bookstore to buy a book or a library to borrow one. I mean, can you imagine a world like that? I mean, and I had to go to a bank to bank. I never go to a bank. You don't do that. I mean, so to get God, you have to go to a church, and He shows up at 11 o'clock on Sunday. And sometimes for my tradition, He had to have a night visit because we were slow learners. And then in the middle of the week, He made a midweek appearance. So I mean, the craziness of thinking, all right, so if I want a spiritual experience, I got to wait for a certain time in a world where digital has made everything ubiquitous, asynchronous, immediate, anytime, anywhere. Mm-hmm. And so if I want to talk to somebody about God, I'm not going to wait 4 days till I can get a new sermon under belt. There's just the whole notion that we are, plotting people's spiritual journeys and those kinds of, so I tell church leaders all the time, it's not your fault. I mean, the fact that people are not turning to organized religious experience for their primary spiritual expression, it's because our ordinary institutional church expression is just not in sync with a world that operates 24/7. And the COVID virus, the pandemic, and hopefully it'll be ancient history by the time people are viewing this. But those of us who are living in it right now, I mean, the COVID has thrown the church out into the street. This has been good for the church. Not that I would ever say the virus is something I'd want to replicate, or although even there you can see the digital revolution. Look how much quicker we're able to respond, work on vaccines, work on therapeutics because of the digitization of information. I mean, it's changing everything.
Yeah.
And so what's interesting though about the church is those folks that think we're going to be able to go back to normal. I mean, their strategy is, how do we get back inside the church, together, and which is, that's going back to another world that doesn't exist anymore. And I'm not against gathering. I know we're going to come back together, but if that's the chief expression of our spirituality, that we are able to meet and have a worship service, I mean, are you kidding? I mean, as the church figures out its way to be a movement, this is church's movement when we're in the street. And that's the big shift that's underway right now, is to, and those that, that get that are positioning themselves for a ministry in this fourth information revolution. Now, I'm not naive. I understand every movement settles down, it calcifies over time, but not at the front of it. We're in the front of it. It's messy. We don't know our way yet. I tell church leaders, you're going to you need to fail fast. Try some stuff. Don't camp out over it. And whereas we have these tried and true expressions of the faith, you're in a Presbyterian tribe, and so I mean that was made possible by the last information revolution.
Yeah,
that never would have happened without the printing press, and all the denominations that have come out of the Reformation, all more right than everybody else. I'm sorry that y'all don't quite have it right yourself. I'm a little ahead of you, but so now there's a whole the expression of the church. We're seeing the church express itself in a far the bandwidth of how church looks is going to be dramatically increased, and it won't fit the one size, the congregational modality that was supported by all of the previous information revolutions. We're being pushed into another kind of expression, other kinds of expression actually, and they don't fit our Reformation ecclesiology, where the past 500 years has been all about, what makes a real church, who can do what and when, can they wear a skirt, who's authorized to handle the stuff. I mean, all of that is just old stuff. Now I'm seeing church trying to be in the street. It's church's restaurant, church's sports bar, church as business. I mean, I had a couple that I interviewed about a year ago, and I won't use their names here because they've not authorized me to. But it's a multi-million. I mean, it's enormous. It may approach $1 billion, but what they do, and it requires lots of migrant workers and stuff like that for their agricultural business. But that is their church. They build communities for their migrant workers. They hire pastors, to be available to their migrant families, and they work with immigration reform and all this stuff. I mean, and they literally will say our business is our way of being church in the world now. And I know there are people that are listening and say, well, that doesn't line up with the Westminster Confession or whatever else. I'm not saying confessions are evil, but I just think the Spirit's busting up these old, there's a ditch here and a ditch here, but the road's getting wider. Yeah. And I'm seeing church as community development center, and we can talk about why that's critical as we, in another episode here when we talk about what kingdom looks like as the church pursues that.
Yeah, great. Have you noticed in looking at the different information revolutions a pattern or a trend of similarity of critiques? I know when I've read a little bit on various of those revolutions you've talked about, a lot of the things you hear today about the digital revolution were repeated in refrains in those times as well.
Absolutely. There's always the pushback against disruptive technology. Oh, that'll never work, or no, that's of the devil. I mean, there were folks that didn't like the printing press because, you could mass produce ugly, pornographic pictures. So it was making it more accessible. And so, you're always in that kind of discussion among people that embrace and move toward the new and figure out, how to be in this, versus those that kind of drive with a rear view mirror. How can we get back?
Yeah.
Anyone that's talking to me about getting back to anything doesn't get it.
Yeah. What do you have a common encouragement or maybe kind of a way of putting it for folks who have some of those critiques and are a little bit tentative towards embracing this fourth information revolution? Is there something you would like to say to them that would help them to see how maybe this is an opportunity for the church rather than a detriment?
Yeah, if I were going to say we have to distinguish between programmatic response and strategies of methodologies. We confuse methodologies with doctrinal truths that withstand, that are forever. I mean, there are true truths. Some people, when they even hear me talk about, being relevant and all that, they think I'm throwing out. I mean, that's a mindset, that says, but no, there are truths, about, the human condition, about God's reaching out to people, about what it means to be a Jesus follower. Those and how you evidence that in your life. Those are truths. Yeah. They're true truths. Methods, programs, even ecclesiological responses to those are always being scripted and shaped by the cult, by the whatever the context. So I would say be careful to distinguish context from the contours of your faith, which are, don't screw those up together, because otherwise, when your methods go down and they don't work anymore, your faith goes down.
Yeah.
And I see that a lot.
Yeah.
People that are, if we can't worship together, we can't be. No, that's thinking that's going to. So I know you asked me for an encouragement.
Yeah.
So my encouragement is to think really hard about what the essentials of the faith are, the truths, and the relationship you have with Jesus, which ultimately is the key point, and then the other stuff that's basically expressions of religion. In fact, if I were going to say, I would say, when they asked Jesus, when the lawyer asked Jesus, what's the great, and you love God, everything you have, love your neighbor as yourself, hang on to those two things. Everything else can be religious talk. Live those two, go for those, and then, or like Augustine said, love God with everything you have, then do what you want.
Which is a problem that solves itself there, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.